Before we begin, we publish new content every day. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. They say that at 73, you should know better than to let anyone walk all over you. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes the person doing the walking has been doing it for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to stand upright. I'm sitting in my kitchen now, sipping tea from my favorite china cup, the one with tiny roses that my mother gave me 50 years ago. The house is quiet except for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. It's a peace I've grown to cherish, though it took me decades to understand that silence could be a gift rather than a punishment. My name is Margaret, though my family has called me Maggie for as long as I can remember. I've been a widow for 12 years now, and for most of those years, I believed my purpose was to make everyone else's life easier, even if it meant making mine infinitely harder. I had 3 children, all grown now with families of their own, and I thought being a good mother meant saying yes to everything they asked, no matter how unreasonable. The pattern started innocently enough after Harold passed. My oldest, David, began stopping by more frequently. At first, I was grateful for the company. The house felt cavernous without Harold's booming voice filling the rooms. David would bring his laundry because his washing machine was broken, he said. Then it became a regular thing, even after he got it fixed. Sarah, my middle child, started dropping off her 2 young children every weekend so she could have what she called me time with her husband. My youngest, Michael, moved back in temporarily after his divorce, which stretched from 3 months to 3 years. I told myself I was being helpful. I was being the kind of mother who was there when her children needed her. Harold always said I had enough love for an army, and I tried to live up to that memory. But somewhere along the way, being helpful became being taken for granted. And being there for them meant disappearing from my own life. The requests grew bigger and more frequent. David's wife went back to work, so could I watch their baby during the day? Of course, I said. Sarah needed someone to drive her kids to soccer practice because she was too busy. Naturally, I volunteered. Michael couldn't afford his own place yet. Could he stay just a little longer? How could I say no to my own child? I found myself waking up at 6 in the morning to prepare breakfast for Michael before he left for work, then rushing to pick up David's baby, spending my days changing diapers and preparing bottles, only to have Sarah arrive in the afternoon with her children, expecting dinner to be ready and homework to be supervised. My evenings were spent doing laundry for 3 different households, ironing shirts for David's job interviews, and cleaning up after everyone else's messes. The requests weren't limited to childcare and housework. David needed money for a down payment on a house. Sarah's car needed expensive repairs. Michael was between jobs again and couldn't make his car payment. Each time, they came to me with their problems. And each time, I opened my purse and my heart, dipping into the savings Harold and I had worked so hard to build. I began to notice how they talked to me during these visits. There were no questions anymore, only statements. David would walk in and announce that he was dropping off his laundry. Sarah would call to inform me that she was bringing the kids over, not to ask if it was convenient. Michael would leave his dishes in the sink for days, expecting me to clean up after him as if he were still 10 years old. When I tried to suggest that maybe they could help out a little more, or perhaps give me some advance notice before bringing their children over, they would exchange glances that I pretended not to see. Sarah would sigh and say that she thought I enjoyed spending time with my grandchildren. David would remind me that I had always been the one to hold the family together. Michael would look hurt and mention how difficult his divorce had been, how he needed his family's support during this challenging time. I swallowed my words and continued to say yes. I told myself that this was temporary, that things would get better, that eventually they would see how much I was sacrificing and appreciate it. I waited for thank you cards that never came, for offers to help that were never extended, for recognition that never arrived. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday in October. I had been battling a cold for a week, the kind that settles deep in your chest and makes you feel like you're breathing through cotton. My doctor had advised rest, but rest was a luxury I couldn't afford with my current schedule. I had David's 6-month-old daughter for the day. Sarah's twins were coming after school, and Michael had invited friends over for dinner without bothering to mention it until that morning. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup with one hand while bouncing the baby with the other. When David called, his wife was feeling overwhelmed, he said. Could I keep the baby overnight, maybe for the weekend? I looked down at the infant in my arms, her tiny face peaceful in sleep, and felt a familiar tug of guilt. Of course, I heard myself saying. Of course I could keep her. 20 minutes later, Sarah called. The school had called her at work. The twins were sick and needed to be picked up immediately. Could I get them? Her voice carried that tone I had grown accustomed to. The one that suggested this was not really a request but an expectation. I looked at the baby, still sleeping in my arms, then at the soup that was starting to burn on the stove, then at the clock that showed I had exactly 30 minutes before Michael's friends arrived for a dinner I hadn't started preparing. Something inside me cracked. Not broke, exactly, but cracked like ice on a frozen pond. Hairline fractures that would eventually lead to something larger. I hung up the phone and called Sarah back. For the first time in years, I said no. I told her I was sick, that I already had the baby, and that she would need to make other arrangements. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold and clipped. She said she guessed she would have to leave work early, as if this were a tremendous inconvenience that I was personally responsible for. That evening, Michael's friends arrived to find me sitting in the living room with the baby. No dinner prepared, no table set. Michael emerged from his bedroom with the expectant look of someone who assumed everything would be taken care of. When he saw the empty dining room table, his face darkened. He asked where dinner was, and I told him I hadn't prepared any. He reminded me that he had mentioned his friends were coming. I acknowledged that he had mentioned it, but pointed out that mentioning something is not the same as asking, and asking is not the same as planning. His friends shifted uncomfortably in the doorway, sensing tension they didn't understand. Michael accused me of being unreasonable. He said that ever since Dad died, I had been impossible to please, that nothing he did was ever good enough for me. His friends exchanged glances and mumbled excuses about needing to leave early. After they left, Michael stormed off to his room, slamming the door like a teenager. I sat in the living room with David's baby, listening to the house settle around us, and realized that this was the first evening in months when I wasn't rushing around trying to please everyone else. The baby was content. The house was quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning brought a series of phone calls that felt like an intervention. David called first, his voice tight with frustration. Sarah had told him about my refusal to pick up the twins, and he wanted to know what was going on with me. Sarah called an hour later, her tone suggesting that I owed her an apology. Even Michael emerged from his room to inform me that his friends thought I was rude. Instead of apologizing, I found myself asking questions. I asked David when he planned to pick up his daughter and take her home. I asked Sarah if she had considered hiring a babysitter or asking her husband to share pickup duties. I asked Michael when he planned to move out and start taking care of himself again. The questions were met with silence, then with arguments that I had always been happy to help before. David reminded me that family was supposed to be there for each other. Sarah pointed out that I had never complained about watching the children before. Michael accused me of suddenly becoming selfish in my old age, but I wasn't becoming selfish. I was becoming awake. I was beginning to see the difference between being needed and being used, between being helpful and being taken advantage of. The distinction was clearer than I had expected once I started looking for it. Over the next few weeks, I began implementing small changes. I told David that I could babysit 1 day a week, but he needed to give me at least 2 days' notice. I informed Sarah that I was available for emergency childcare only, not regular weekend babysitting. I gave Michael a 30-day notice to find his own place. The response was swift and intense. My children accused me of abandoning them in their time of need. They reminded me of all the things they had done for me, though when pressed for specifics, the list was surprisingly short. They suggested that I was becoming bitter and difficult, that grief was making me unreasonable. For a while, I wondered if they were right. I lay awake at night questioning my decisions, remembering all the years when saying yes had felt like love. But then I would wake up in the morning to a quiet house where I could drink my coffee in peace, where I could read the newspaper without interruption, where I could make plans for my day that didn't revolve around everyone else's needs. The hardest part wasn't the guilt or the accusations, it was the loneliness that followed. My children's visits became less frequent and more strained. Phone calls were shorter and filled with awkward silences. I had anticipated this possibility, but experiencing it was different from imagining it. I filled the silence by reconnecting with parts of myself that had been dormant for years. I joined a book club at the library and discovered that I had opinions about literature that had nothing to do with anyone else's preferences. I started taking watercolor classes and found that my hands remembered skills from my youth that I thought were lost forever. I began volunteering at the local animal shelter, where my nurturing instincts were appreciated but not taken for granted. Slowly, my children began to adjust to the new boundaries. David hired a babysitter and discovered that his wife was actually quite capable of managing pickup schedules when she had to. Sarah's husband stepped up to share more of the parenting responsibilities, and their marriage seemed stronger for it. Michael moved into his own apartment, and to my surprise, thrived with the independence. The relationships didn't return to what they were before, but they evolved into something healthier. My children began calling to ask how I was doing rather than to tell me what they needed. Visits became social rather than transactional. They started expressing gratitude for the help I chose to give, rather than expecting it as their due. David brought me flowers one Sunday afternoon, just because. Sarah asked if I wanted to join her for lunch, with no children in tow, no agenda beyond spending time together. Michael invited me to see his new apartment, proud to show me how well he was managing on his own. The most profound change was in how I saw myself. For so many years, I had defined my worth by how useful I was to others, how much I could give, how many problems I could solve. I had confused being needed with being loved, and in the process, I had made myself indispensable in ways that were ultimately unhealthy for everyone involved. Learning to say no had taught me the value of yes. When I chose to help now, it came from a place of genuine desire rather than obligation. When I spent time with my grandchildren, it was because I wanted to be with them, not because I was the only available option. When I offered support to my children, it was because I saw a real need, not because I felt guilty for having my own life. The house that once felt too quiet now feels peaceful. The days that once stretched endlessly now seem full of possibilities. I wake up each morning knowing that I get to choose how to spend my time, and that choice feels like a gift I give myself every day. I think about Harold sometimes, wondering what he would think of the woman I've become. I believe he would be proud. He always said I was stronger than I knew, though it took me decades to understand what he meant. Strength isn't just about enduring hardship or sacrificing for others. Sometimes, it's about knowing when to stop doing those things. My children have learned to appreciate me more since I became less available. They've discovered their own strengths and capabilities when I stopped enabling their dependence. Our relationships are different now, but they're built on respect rather than expectation, on love rather than obligation. I still make soup on rainy days, but now I make it because I enjoy the process, not because someone expects me to. I still babysit my grandchildren, but now they come to visit their grandmother, not their unpaid childcare provider. I still help my children when they need it, but now, help is something I choose to give, not something they assume they can take. The woman who said yes to everything is gone, replaced by someone who understands that no can be an act of love, both for yourself and for the people who need to learn to stand on their own. It's a lesson that came late in life, but it's never too late to learn that your own happiness matters just as much as everyone else's. As I finish my tea and prepare to start another day, I smile at the choices that stretch ahead of me. I might paint, or read, or call an old friend, or simply sit in my garden and watch the birds. The beauty is that whatever I choose, it will be my choice, made for my own reasons, in my own time. They say that at 73, you should know better. And now, finally, I do.